Okay, here's our video on divide whole numbers with no remainders. So make sure you write that in the title, top of your page. And then make sure you write down your learning target, which is students can solve real-world problems by dividing whole numbers. If you need to pause to write that down, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to my next example. My first example, really. Okay, here's our first example, divide whole numbers. So when we're dividing, guys, what you need to understand is that you are the 144 divided by 8. The 144 represents how much you have. Dividing it by 8 represents how much you want in each group. So you're taking the 144 and you want to put 8 in, you want groups of 8. Or you could think of it as you're putting it in 8 groups and how many would be in each group. So either way to think of it, you want to break it into 8s. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the first number, 144, and that's going to go on the inside of my division problem. The 8 is going to go on the outside, so I can see how many times 8 goes into 144, but I can do it one number at a time. So that's how I set it up. Now I divide. 8 goes into 1. This is how many times. How many times does 8 go into 1? It does not go into 1. So that's a 0. So then I look at the next number, and that was 1 digit. Now I'm going to extend that to 2 digits. How many times does 8 go into 14? Well, 8 can only go into 14 once. Twice would be 16, and that's too much. So it can go into 14 once. So I multiply those. 1 times 8 is 8, and that goes under line up place values. In my particular example, I'm only focusing on the 14, not the 144. So in the 14, the 4 and the 8 are in the same place value. I subtract those. 14 minus 8 is 6. Now I can bring down the 4. I like to do little arrows to remind myself to bring them down. My next number is 64. Now notice the 0 went above the 1, and the 1 went above the 4 in 14. Now when I do this problem, 8 goes into 64 8 times. 8 times, that's going to be above the other 4, the one I just brought down, so all my place values are lining up with each other. It's very important to be organized when you're working on these. 8 times 8 is 64, so when I subtract those, I have a remainder of 0. So my final answer is 0, 1, 8. I don't write the 0 in front of the 18, so my final answer is just 18. And that's how you divide. If you need to pause or rewind, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll be moving on to the next example. Okay. Ooh, here's a tricky one. A lot of people don't know what to do here. That is a fraction bar. This looks like a fraction, and it is a fraction. But a fraction stands for division. So you need to know that when you see a fraction bar or a fraction problem, that also represents division. So this is 645 divided by 15. I have 645 of something, and I want to break it into groups of 15. So how many times can I do that? So the 645 is going to go on the inside. The 15 is going to go on the outside. Okay. 15 goes into 6. Start with 1 digit. 0 times. 15 goes into 64 4 times. So I'm going to put the 4 above the 4. I'm lining that up. When I do that, 15 times 4 is 60. Notice that I still have this all lined up. I'm kind of ignoring the 5 right now. I have the 4 above the 4, the 0 below the 4, so everything's lining up. I subtract. 4 minus 0 is 4. 6 minus 6 is 0. Now I bring down the 5, keeping things lined up. Now my 4 becomes 45. I want to see how many times 15 goes into 45. That is 3. Keeping things lined up. The 3 is above the 5. Okay, got to keep everything lined up. 3 times 15 is 45. I subtract those and I get 0. So my answer is 043 or 43. If you need to pause or rewind, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next example. Okay, in my last example, I'm going to divide again. I have 372. I'm going to break it into groups 31. So I take the 372 on the inside. 31 goes on the outside. Make sure you always give yourself lots of room when you're working on these problems. Don't try to crunch them down and not line things up and make small mistakes because of that. All right, 31 does not go into 3, so that's 0. 31 goes into 37 once. That is 31. And when I subtract, 7 minus 1 is 6. 3 minus 3 is 0. I'm going to bring down the 2. 31 goes into 62. Oh, almost out of batteries. That goes in twice. 2 times 31 is 62. I subtract. 62 minus 62 is 0. And so my final answer is 0, 1, 2, or just 12. And that's how you have to do that. Okay? If you have any questions or need to rewind or anything, go ahead. Otherwise, that is it. Have a great night, and I will see you guys tomorrow.